Hi everyone, welcome to this class. The topic of study is a short story penned by Bandhu Mahadev, and the name of the story is The Poisoned Bread. Now, The Poisoned Bread was penned by Bandhu Mahadev, who is a Dalit short story writer who also belongs to the Mahar community of Maharashtra. Now, he was a prolific writer who wrote extensively during the 1930s, between the 1930s and between the 1950s. He played a very pivotal role in founding the Little Magazine movement, which blended both modernism and Dalit movement. Now, basically, The Poisoned Bread is a short story, and it is a story of an awakened but suppressed Dalit consciousness and presence dissenting voices against upper caste domination and exploitation. Now, basically, Dalit literature has got more to do with the Dalit literature has got more to do with caste oppression that has been faced by the lower caste or the Dalit section of the society, and the subjugation, oppression, and discrimination that they face in the hands of the upper caste people. Now, it shows how a situation has empowered a new generation of Dalits to reclaim their legitimate space in a caste-ridden society that continues to diminish them. So basically, how this situation, or basically how this present situation has empowered the new generation, that is the new generation, the upcoming generation of the Dalits, to reclaim their legitimate space, that is their rightful space in a caste-ridden society that continues to exploit them, subjugate them, oppress them, arrest and suppress them. Now, the central character or the protagonist of the play, I'm sorry, I stand corrected, the central character of the short story is Mahadeva. Now, he is someone who's very indifferent to the caste system, and he's very indifferent to the caste system, and he addresses the upper caste landlord by his name itself. The name of the upper caste landlord is Bapu Patil, but Mahadeva, who belongs to the lower caste, and he is Dalit. He addresses the upper caste landlord as Patil. Bapu Patil is the name of the landlord, and Patil is how he is addressed by Mahadeva. And he despises he resents his grandfather's subservience or slavishness to his landlord, that is Bapu Patil. Now basically there are three characters in this short story. One is Mahadeva, the grandson, or let's say the narrator of the short story, and the second one is Yatalya, who is the grandfather. And the last one is Bapu Patil, who is the landlord, who is a brutal landlord who ill-treats his worker, that is Mahadeva's grandfather, that is Yatalya. Now Patil is someone who humiliates both Mahadeva and his grandson and his grandfather Yatalya. They both of them are denied their daily wages in spite of toiling on the fields, toiling on the fields, and they are they get a very meager share of corn, forced in the end to feed on the stale, dung smeared and poisoned bread. Now, as mentioned earlier, both Mahadeva and Yatalya toil on the fields, but however, they are not given they work for their meager share of corn, and they also work for their wages, but however, they are not given them. On the other hand, they are given stale bread, which is even not taken by the cows who are in the cow shed. Now, this degradation ultimately takes the life of the grandfather. That is, the grandfather Yatalya consumes the stale bread, and he gets dysentery and he dies. He dies the realization that it is through the Dalit identity is not one of slavishness but of reclaiming his rights as a human being. He dies in a very tragic way, and he dies telling his grandson Mahadeva that that the Dalit identity is one which is not of which should not be of subjugation, oppression, exploitation, or slavishness, and therefore it should be something of humanity. This struggle is the legacy he leaves for his grandson Mahadeva, invoking the future of the Dalit movement. His struggle is basically something that is something that Mahadeva sees as something that can be invoked by the future of the Dalit movement. Now, more more details about the short story. This short story was published in an anthology of Dalit literature titled Poison Bread. Now, this book was edited by Arjun Dangre. Now, he was one of the major Dalit, or one of the most popular Dalit writers, and he wrote short stories, poems, and essays. Now, he wrote in a way that the writings had started in Marathi and later spread to other languages to eventually influence the whole of India. Now, his collection, most of the writings were in Marathi, and they influenced other genres as well, and it spread across India. The collection forced the mainstream literati to take note of the new literature created out of the miseries of the oppressed. So basically, it highlighted or it brought into light the miseries, the oppression, the subjugation, the discrimination faced by the Dalits or the lower castes, the lower section of society, as they are exploited or in the hands of the exploitation in the hands of the upper caste society. This literature of protest, that is Dalit literature, motivated a large number of Dalit young men and women who wanted to change the system. Basically, Dalit literature was literature of dissent and protest. It influenced, it inspired many young Dalit men and women who wanted to change the system. Now, this short story titled Poison Bread points out the situation of Dalits without land and livelihood. Basically, they are people who are deprived of their basic rights. They work, they toil, and they are people who are deprived of even for their basic needs, rights, and even their lands and livelihood. Now, these issues need to be addressed to help the Dalits emerge from the situation and experience equality, freedom, and development. Basically, these problems which are experienced by the Dalit people are those which have emerged from their situation and experience which have emerged or which have become a part of their experience, and they wish to fight for their equality, freedom, independence, and development. Now, as mentioned earlier, Yatalya is one of the major characters in the short story. Yatalya is the grandfather of his grandson Mahadeva. And basically, there are three major characters in this short story. The first one is Yatalya, who is the grandfather, who succumbs to his death after eating the stale, poisoned bread. He gets dysentery. And the second character is Mahadeva, who has been bred in the city, who has been educated in the city, but does not come under or does not obey does not become slave of the brutal does not become the slave of the brutal Babu Patil, that is the landlord. Now, a Mahar is subjected to long subjugation at the hands of the upper caste. Now, as in the second last point, Yatalya Aja, he is he's one of the central characters of the short story. He is someone who faces exploitation in the hands of his landlord, the brutal landlord, that is Babu Patil. The Dalits live a marginalized life and have been ostracized, which is a stigma for the society. The Dalits live a very sad life and they have been ostracized, they have been subjugated, oppressed, and exploited for being a part of the lowest strata of the society. Now, basically, the short story is a flashback of the grandson named Bandhu Mahadev, and he is a small boy, and the flashback goes behind 12 years. Now, the author visits his village. He visits his village after 12 years, and he accompanies his grandfather to Bapu Patil, a village landowner, in order to work for him and beg for a larger share of the corn or the crop. Now, but his expectations are not met due to the fact that the conflict in the story arises with the narrator's aggressive reply to Patil. Basically, there is a verbal duel between Patil, the brutal landlord, and Yatalya's grandson, none other than, as we know, Mahadeva. There is a verbal duel between the two, as in Mahadeva retorts to Bahubatan's rude remarks, and therefore they are deprived, they are denied their daily wages and their share of crop, that is corn. The narrator represents the new force and the voice of the new generation that is more aware of its self respect and dignity. The narrator, none other than Bandhu Madhav, who is being given the name of Mahadev as central or pivotal character, the protagonist of the short story. He represents the new voice, the youth of the voice of the youth that is that is aware of their own self-respect and dignity. Next, the grandfather and grandson work the entire, that is both Yatalya and Mahadeva work the entire day in the scorching heat, toiling and tilling on the field. But Patil doesn't pay them anything in return. The grandfather collects since he is famished. He has worked the entire day toiling on the fields. He is famished. He collects the stale bread that is next to the pen or the cow shed, which is not even taken by, which is not even consumed by the cows, which is even despised by the cows. On their way home, that is both Yatalya and Mahadeva, on their way home, in their conversation, they share an experience, they share their experience, their personal experience of being exploited by the upper caste, in the hands of the landowners. Next, the only solution that Mahadev suggests is that to get rid of the hereditary holding by abandoning it. Now, grandfather Yatalya is convinced by the words of his grandson, and he takes a few crumbs from his sack and throws it towards the dogs near his house. They get home, and his grandmother, that is the central character's grandmother, collects those crumbs, cooks them, mixes it with a gravy called dalli, and all the other members of the family consume it. But unfortunately, the grandfather or Yatalya succumbs to dysentery and dies. When his wife, that is Yatalya's wife, that is the central character's grandmother, comes out of the house, she gathers all those crumbs and prepares dinner with it. She mixes it with a gravy called dalli and she prepares dinner with it, which everybody consumes, but it adversely affects the health of Yatalya. He succumbs to dysentery and dies. The entire family feeds on the food prepared by the grandmother. The grandfather becomes sick due to food poisoning, that is, Yatalya becomes sick due to food poisoning, he gets dysentery, and the grandfather succumbs to his disease and dies. This is the short story as given by the narrator and the short story writer Bandhu Mahadev. That's it. Thank you.